Good afternoon, Howard Wiig, Code Green Think Tech Hawaii. Do I have a fascinating guest today or what? Mr. Erik Kvam is the Managing Director of Hawaii Energy Law Services. He is an attorney, and he's also the President of Renewable Energy Action Coalition of Hawaii, a trade association dedicated to clean energy. Mr. Kvam, that's pronounced correctly? Kvam?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. Has been in the renewable and clean energy business for 11 years, and this is very fascinating. For the first 7 years, he did what everybody else was doing, engaging in a confrontational format with the opposition. After 7 years, he figured out this isn't working. And I, having been with the State Energy Office forever, can confirm that over a longer time frame. And he had an epiphany. Hey, what if we do what we in Hawaiian call ho'oponopono? We just sit down and treat each other as respectful partners and work things out. Fascinating. Another fascinating thing about Erik's philosophy is hearkening to that movie, The 300. Remember The 300? That's ancient Greece, and the Persians. They knew the Persians were invading, and they had an army of thousands, by far the most powerful army in the world at the time. And little old Greece, how are they going to defend themselves? Well, the Spartans took it upon themselves to go to an isthmus of land over which the Persians had to traverse, and there's a cliff on one side and a cliff down into the boiling ocean on the other side. And they would defend all of Greece this way, 300 versus thousands and thousands, and by George, they almost did it. The reason I'm bringing this up is Mr. Kvam has figured out that to achieve 100% clean energy by 2045 for electrical production, you need just 30 people. So if he were to produce a movie, it might be called The 30. So welcome, Erik, to this program.
Thank you, Howard.
This
it's a pleasure to be here.
Really, 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 really fascinating. Why don't you start out by giving the genesis of this program here?
The genesis of the program. Well, as you said, I've been in renewable energy for 11 years here in Hawaii, and I spent the first 7 of those years advocating policy solutions involved making our electric company do things, obligating them to do things, and forcing them to do things, because I thought that was the way to get them to make the decisions that I wanted them to make. And after 7 years, I realized, again, as you told the story, it didn't work. It's not working. And I'd say my epiphany came in the form of saying to myself, well, what's it like to be a person at the utility, at Hawaiian Electric, who's the recipient of a presentation by a project developer, and that project developer presents their project, outlines the benefits, why it's a good thing for the utility and for all of its ratepayers. And for me, the person that works for the utility to receive that, I might understand, I hope I better understand it, and agree with it, understand the benefits, perceive them, and the person, the developer presenting the project departs after the meeting. I may be convinced, but now I'm in a large hierarchy of people. There are people that in that hierarchy that report to me, that I report to others. There are people in other branches of the hierarchy. And how do I get agreement among this organization to pursue this particular option? And to get that kind of consensus within the organization is really difficult for any given, no matter how good the option is for the utility and for its ratepayers. And so I started to understand that what would serve people at the utility is what I call a planning process, a process by which they can evaluate any given option and then be able to compare it with all the many other renewable energy options that are available to the utility.
Yeah, there's plenty of plans out there.
There's hundreds of
Yeah,
them. There's hundreds of
yeah.
options. And when they have that kind of a process that allows them to evaluate renewable energy options in a way that they can be compared, then when they pick the options that they want to implement, they'll have a high degree of confidence in them.
Yeah,
And-
you're narrowing the
Right.
risk down. You're going from really,
Right.
this is risky to this is pretty darn low risk here.
Right, exactly,
yeah.
precisely. And so that's the kind of process that I'm talking about. And that's a conversation that's ongoing now with Hawaiian Electric. But I came to the realization that before the people at Hawaiian Electric were ready to have that conversation, we have to have a conversation before that, which is a conversation about what we want, what they want, where's the congruence, where's the consensus on that. And so the story of that is that because talking about a planning process and how do you make a plan, that's all part of the how do we get there, but you have to know where you're going first. And so the conversation that I started with the utility, and this is the story of the 30 or the 300 as you described, was I started a conversation process with people with the utility, and it was very helpful to be part of the regulatory dockets because that gave me access to people at the utility and all levels of the utility. This is not just talking top management, but just the people that are responsible for making decisions about renewable energy options. And talking with them, not about the options, but about what's the future of the business? How can I help you succeed and make good decisions, make better decisions, make decisions that you have confidence in? Because when people at the utility start experiencing personal success, when they as an organization experience business success in their decisions, then we in the renewable energy industry, we're going to succeed too.
Yeah.
We're going to succeed
And
too.
this is a time of huge uncertainty for our utility and for almost any mainland utility also. We are at the crossroads, and they are faced with many, many dilemmas.
Right, and that kind of goes back to that conversation with a person at the utility who's the recipient of a presentation. And to be that person is basically to be frustrated, because even though you might personally agree with that, if you don't have a process in place at the utility by which the organization as a whole can come into consensus on that particular option, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen for the utility. It's not going to happen for the renewable energy industry as well. And so the story there is that I started talking with them about a planning goal of 100% renewable energy and saying, this is, I invite you to consider this, not telling them that you should do this, not saying if you don't do this, I'm going to go to the PUC or the legislature and insist that you do that and make you do that, but just a conversation about the advantages, the benefits of having that as a planning goal, is to be able to orient your planning efforts. Because once you get agreement on the what, on what you want, in other words, having a utility that's in consensus that it's going to 100% renewable energy, that they want to make a plan to get there, that's the starting point. And so in the report that you referred to, that I think you're using as the title of this episode, Creating the Electric Utility We Want, I talk about a consensus, I call it a consensus-based process for successfully achieving 100% renewable energy. And when I talk about consensus-based, I mean consensus among people at the utility. And what it addresses is what you just touched on, which is that we're at a crossroads. Where do we go? How do we get there? And there's tremendous confusion in all quarters. There's such a myriad of considerations that are taken into account. And what I tried to do is step back from it, and I work with, I call them three realities. And the first of those realities that I work with is that The only plan that matters is the plan that gets implemented. Okay, so anyone can make a plan. Okay,
Yeah,
if it's not implemented, it has no meaning at all. So that's the first reality.
I've seen so many plans over the years, both in government and in the private sector. Sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars were paid for this, bringing in the mainland experts, and it's a big, thick, beautiful looking plan, and it goes up on a shelf.
It goes on a shelf.
And it sits there.
That's exactly, and it's really, I mean, this is really important, okay? You know, plans have been made and are still being made. And the question is will they get implemented? So that's the first reality. The only plan that matters is a plan that gets implemented. The second reality is this, as far as renewable energy for electricity production involving, you know, the utility. And the second reality is that the only plan that's going to get implemented by Hawaiian Electric is the plan that the people at Hawaiian Electric make for themselves, okay? For me to make a plan and go in there and say, here, do this, try this, it's not going to work. They have to have, the only plan that they're really going to have confidence in and implement is the one that they make for themselves. So that means me stepping back from being an advocate for any given option and instead inviting them to consider a planning process as a first step, getting consensus on a planning process to make a plan. Okay, so you have to have consensus on how you make a plan before you can have a plan, before you can have consensus on the plan itself. And then the third reality that I talk about is that if we, and when I say we, I mean the renewable energy industry, if we want Hawaiian Electric to make a plan that helps us succeed, then we have to help the people at Hawaiian Electric make a plan that helps them succeed. It's a mutual thing, okay? So my philosophy is that in talking to them, very different from before those 7 years, is I'm here to help you succeed. I'm not here to tell you what options you should select. I am here to help you succeed because I'm convinced that when you start succeeding, that we're going to be succeeding as well, speaking for the renewable energy industry. And so looking again at the big, gigantic ball of confusion, I break it down to four areas, it's not really steps, but it's really more like 4 levels of consensus that in which I'm trying to help Hawaiian Electric come into consensus on. The first of those is a planning goal of 100% renewable energy. And there I would say that consensus has been achieved, okay? And having consensus on the level of a planning goal, that was the hardest and longest step, I think, to us successfully, and I say us, everyone, the utility and all the renewable people, successfully achieving 100% renewable energy. And it took the long time. It took 3 years of those conversations with Hawaiian Electric to kind of plant the idea and get it, to allow it to grow among the people at Hawaiian Electric, so that they're now a consensus of it. So that peeled back a whole level of confusion. A whole level, and you can see it, and you can see it in the conference titles. We have conferences that say, "How do we get to 100% renewable energy?" Because the what question has been answered. The what we want question of 100% renewable energy has been answered of 100% renewable energy. So now the question is, how do we get there?
And we need to take a break first. And what this reminds me of is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And excuse me, the main thing I got out of that was have a North Star. Everybody has a North Star. And what you did in those 3 years, I think, is getting everybody to agree, this is our North Star, or this is our vision.
Right.
But on that cheery note, we need to take a brief break. Think Tech Hawaii, Code Green, back in a moment.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm fortunate to be able to host Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. I hope you'll join in with us every Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. to see the interesting people we have to share with you their information. Aloha.
I'm Jay Fidel, and I'm the host of Research in Manoa, Mondays from 12 to 1 on thinktechhawaii.com. take a look at us and learn about geophysics, learn about planetology, learn about the ocean and earth sciences at UH Manoa. You'll really enjoy it. So come around, we'll see you then.
Aloha! I'm Chantal Seville, the host of The Savvy Chick Show, which you can watch every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on thinktechhawaii.com. On The Savvy Chick Show, we are all about inspiring and empowering women and girls to be the best they can be by having amazing guests from all around the world. So we hope you'll join us every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Aloha!
Good afternoon again. Code Green, Howard Wiig, Think Tech Hawaii. My guest is the Honorable Erik Kvam, who we could say is the father of the phrase 100% clean energy for electricity production by the year 2045. I might mention that when the governor uttered that phrase and declared that to be the state of Hawaii's goal, he made not national, but I've heard international news on that. This was by far at the time the most aggressive goal that any state or municipality in the nation had set. And that says something because so many utilities and municipalities are headed in exactly the same direction. As a nation, we've shut down over 200 coal-fired plants in the last few years, just to give an indication of how dramatically the utility industry is progressing towards clean energy and efficiency. And on that cheery note, we were talking about a 4-step process, and you got through step 1.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll summarize them, but
Okay.
I'd like to come back to what you were just saying about having that as a planning goal, what it means to have 100% RPS, and most importantly, the example that it sets for the rest of the globe.
Yes.
I mean, that's what motivates me. But really quickly, So talking about changing the collective mind, the collective thinking at an organization, helping them come into consensus, okay? So having consensus on the planning goal allows us to have a conversation now on the how part of it. How do we get there? And the first step of that is what I call a planning process oriented to the goal of 100% renewable energy.
Makes sense.
And that's a consensus on how do you create a plan? What kinds of benefits, for example, of each option do you look for? And some of the benefits are measurable, some are not measurable. How do you evaluate them? So that's a conversation in progress. And once there's consensus, again, among the people at Hawaiian Electric about the planning process, then the next step is consensus on the plan itself. In other words, implementing the planning process to create a plan. And that's going to give them a plan for which to get us to 100% renewable energy. But more importantly, they don't have to implement the whole plan. They just have to implement the first step of the plan. And if they've done their analysis using a planning process that evaluates the options in a way that they can be compared, they're going to have a high degree of confidence. They'll actually make the decisions, and then we'll have a plan that gets implemented. And the third step of the last step of the process is the implementation of the plan. I call that procurement process. It's saying, okay, we have our plan, we know what we want now, okay, we know what we want later, and that's going to change perhaps, but we know what we want now. We'll do the RFPs, we'll sign the PPAs, we'll make the decisions, and we'll actually move forward on implementing the decisions, implementing the parts of the plan that are ready to be implemented. And that takes consensus too. What procurement method do you use for any given option? And so what I did in this report, which I would invite people, I'm very happy to share it with anyone who likes to read it, is talk about, I think it lends great clarity. Okay, that's what I'm after, is clarity on where things fit in the process. Because so often the discussion about planning process is confused with the discussion about procurement process. They're different things. If you start talking about things like net energy metering and community-based renewable energy, those are parts of a procurement process where we really we're not ready for that conversation yet, because there's not a consensus yet on how to even make a plan, much less how you what the plan is, and much less how you implement the plan by procuring options. So that's my little summary about the steps of the procurement process. But I wanted to come back to what you were saying about the desirability of the goal, really, of 100% renewable energy. And this kind of ties in with the conversation that we had earlier, which is, why is it important? Why is that important? And well, it's important because I take it really, really seriously that when people say it's a perfect place to do this, I take that very seriously because this is the perfect place to do it. And if we're fighting each other, okay, if we're saying, you must follow my plan, you must follow my, you must buy my option, it's going to be a very long time. So I have been trying to figure out, get a framework where all these competing ideas kind of make sense, okay? And that's reflected in the paper, the report that I wrote called "Creating the Electric Utility We Want." And hopefully, at some point, your staff here will flash my email address on the screen.
Yeah, we'll do that right at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. But one of my inspirations for this work.
Let me show the document, if you could.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't show too well, does it? But
no, it does.
yeah. Anyway, we will be showing Erik's email address at the end, and he would be glad to share this study with you. It is an absolutely fascinating study.
So one of the things we talked about was one of the inspirations for doing this was I had the idea that, 100% renewable energy, that needs to be the planning goal. By the way, it needs to be a planning goal in the area of transportation as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's not the next step.
The same process is going to be applicable to all the rest of our energy production and consumption. And I'm working on that as well. But that's farther behind because there's not a consensus now that we are moving to 100% renewable energy for all of our transportation needs, not just ground transportation, but marine and air transportation as well. And it's a lot more daunting. Okay,
Definitely.
It's not readily apparent what the low cost, high benefit options are in that area. But until we get oriented towards that as a goal, it's going to be a lot of confusion. So I don't know, what do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, we're just going to have one slide from Erik's study, if you could. Now, this on its surface is a very, very busy slide, but it's also tremendously interesting, and it has to do with the fact that at one point Hawaii will no longer be receiving imported petroleum.
Well, that's
a pretty radical statement. If you could walk us through this slide here.
Yeah, just a little background. I mean, when I was having the conversation with people at Hawaiian Electric about a planning goal for 100% renewable energy, one of the things I wanted to emphasize is that we're going to go there eventually, okay? And the question is, do you want to get there by planning, or are we going to get there through crisis and be totally unprepared? But I was never, so the response to that is always, well, who knows when the tankers will stop arriving with that. And I discovered this is based on a study. It's based on something called the export land model. And the export land model says this, is that oil imports to the United States are someone else's oil exports. And what's happening in the countries and places in the world that export oil to the United States is that they're increasingly using more of their oil production for themselves and exporting less and less. Okay,
And
to
a lot
places
of
like
them
the
are
United
having
States.
extreme instability also.
That's another factor. But if you just
yeah.
look at so it's possible to look at oil exporting countries and figure out a trend at which point they stop, they're consuming all of the oil that they use and stop being oil exporters to the United States. And different countries are on different timelines to get there, but in a period as short as 11 years from now, there may not be any countries that are exporting oil to the United States of America. And that's what this graph shows. It's the green line on the graph. It shows what the United States' oil exports are predicted to be by the year 2027. They drop to zero in 11 years from now. So that's pretty bad for a country like the United States that's importing about a third of its oil from the rest of the world. But for Hawaii, as part of the United States, we're importing 100% of our oil. Okay, so what's really bad for the United States is an absolute catastrophe for Hawaii, and so it's just a model. It could be right or wrong, but it's based on underlying trends in production and consumption about how people produce and use oil, and it tells me that we need to move fast, okay? And that's why it's so important, kind of going back to the planning process with Hawaiian Electric, to get them on a trajectory, to get them into consensus on these, on planning goal, planning process, plan, and procurement process, so that they're making more and better decisions so that we see an accelerated adoption of renewable energy.
If that doesn't light a fire under everybody, I don't know what will.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't help to scare people either, right? It's all what I try to do in my conversations is emphasize the benefits and the positives, and this is what we want. We want to successfully achieve 100% renewable energy. We don't want to get to 100% renewable energy through crisis and failure. That's not the way we want to get there, and so.
And we've got to close up, and I will.
So fast.
Yeah. I'll also just throw in. I'll emphasize that the oil exporting countries, Nigeria is having serious problems. Saudi Arabia, Libya, and Venezuela. You put those together, you've got a big chunk of oil exporting countries, and they all are having different types of difficulties.
Russia
which lends an additional dimension of credence.
Right, and that that graph that we just saw, that's just trending out, existing patterns of production and consumption. What you call black swan events, the things that you can't foresee, those could dramatically shorten that.
And speaking of shortening, we've got to wrap up. Thank you so much, Erik Kvam. Wow. Oh, and there's Erik's email. Please scribble it down and ask him any and all questions. He loves questions. Thank you very much, Code Green, Think Tech Hawaii, Howard Wiig. See you next time.